Welcome, everybody, to a very special edition of Conversations with Cal. We have two amazing people, Eli Denecke and Hannah Denecke, my brother and sister-in-law, here to talk about their journey, their music, and a lot of other things. So, how you guys doing? Thanks for being here.
Wonderful.
Doing great.
So, I wanted to bring these two along. They are stopping along St. Petersburg, Florida on their tour for their newest album that they put out, which we'll get into a lot. But first, I want to talk about their journey and how they met and what came about. So, Eli, I'll start with you. Flashback 10 plus years ago when you met Hannah, kind of go through that story of how you guys met, where you met, and kind of your journey from there to where you're at now in Fort Wayne, Indiana.
Well, we met in high school. We were both in marching band together, and I played the trumpet, Hannah played the clarinet, and I was pretty shy, so I never talked to her. And there was a couple years that went by when she moved to Macomb,
Me and
where
Cal talked though.
yeah, you
Mhm.
guys had class together and stuff. But we never really talked until I don't know, until I was like a senior, I guess. And then once we started hanging out a little bit, the rest is history.
So I definitely remember Hannah moving to Macomb and new Floridian in town. And because we come from such a small town, everyone's talking about the new girl in town. So we had class together, and Hannah and I were friends. And as Eli said, they ended up meeting after we did and got married in 2016, dated all throughout college, and have been married coming on 7 years now. And it's just been a joyous ride. And I'm glad that we are here today and getting to share stories because these are my favorite people in the world. And I'm super excited to do this podcast, especially because it's my first ever in person one. So thank you for joining us. And I'm happy you're here.
Ooh.
So I want to get into it. This is going to be a lot about music. So you've been into music your whole life, both of you. Can you tell us a little bit about your album, the name of your album, how it came about, the idea of it, and just kind of where that started?
So our new album is called Lady of the Gardens, and all of the songs have connections to plants and flowers in some cases. And I wrote the lyrics and melodies for the songs, and I mostly wrote those during the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic. The songs aren't really about COVID or about even that time really, but they're more about different memories and ideas, and even in some cases theological things I'm thinking about. And what kind of happened with the album is that we both, in the middle of summer of 2020, we wanted to have something to kind of occupy us and kind of keep us grounded as musicians since all our musical performances were canceled. And so we did a songwriting challenge where every day for a month in the summer, I think, we were trying to work on songwriting. What?
It was fun. It was difficult though because you can't always sometimes you think like a song will just hit you like a lightning bolt or a melody or lyrics or whatever. But that was a lot of just like sit down, try to write anything and whatever comes out, that's what you got. And so it was difficult.
Yeah, and the truth is like pretty much nothing came out of that time. But it was kind of getting, at least for me, I've written songs for a long time, and I was kind of getting my chops back as I was kind of practicing songwriting that summer. And the only song that actually got written that summer on my part was Mullen, which is the last one on the album. It was the first one from the album that I wrote. And then the rest, I actually worked in between my classes and my schoolwork as a grad student in fall. And so it was kind of interesting because it felt like there wasn't really anything good that came out of that, but it was the process that kind of got the wheels turning and got us ready to have all those songs written later that year.
And I will just say I don't consider myself a songwriter. I consider myself a song enhancer. And so basically Hannah will write the songs and then I'll take the trumpet out or the mandolin and then add whatever melodic stuff I think would sound good on top of it. So it's kind of collaborative, but I end up seeing the music in the later stages and then we go from there.
So one thing I was unaware of that you just said, Hannah, is that this has been in the works for quite some time, dating back to the pandemic. So can you kind of touch on all those years that it's either sitting with you and it comes out in 2023, and what's that feeling like knowing it's been years in the making of this
Mm.
album?
It's interesting because I was really writing the songs, I would say for myself or for something to do that was grounding musically. And it's not that I didn't imagine sharing them with people, but I didn't write them to share them with people. I wrote them to write songs. And so it's exciting to share them, but it's also kind of bizarre because they felt like they were, I guess, ephemeral. They felt like they were kind of, I would perform them live, but it's not like there was like this physical or like digital recording that anyone could listen to at any time. So that's a really different feeling knowing that if someone feels like they want to listen to Lavender, they can just listen to it at any time. And I think the other thing is because we're both musicians who do a lot of live music, like that's much more both of our comfort area is like performing for people and then we all go home and we just have our good memory of that performance. So it does feel kind of vulnerable for there to be like this one version of these songs that everyone can hear.
And I think some people might feel the opposite, like you craft your song, you get it exactly how you want it, you record it, and it's like, oh, I have this perfect project that all came together. But then trying to perform it live, you're like, oh, I'm tripping over the words or, whatever. And I feel like a lot of these, well, all of these songs started off us just playing at like restaurants or breweries or whatever. And so when we started to get into the like mindset of okay, we got to record these, it was weird for me because a lot of the things I do are improvised.
Yep.
So then to try to like crystallize it into like okay, I'm going to do this every time
Yep.
started to be kind of like a weird process because we weren't really thinking that way at first. But the songs have sort of morphed because of the recording process, which I didn't expect.
They're just usually different every time. So if you heard us perform it at a venue or a bar or a restaurant over the last 3 years, it would have sounded different each time. And so it's special to have this kind of out there in the world, but it kind of marks kind of the end of my process with this album in many ways because we were still kind of experimenting with the songs and playing with them, and now it feels like this is sort of like the final draft or the final copy. Even though, of course, we're on tour and we're still playing them now, and we still do improvisatory different stuff every night when we play them. But yeah, it definitely changed my relationship to them, and now I think of them as something that belongs to the public and anyone who wants to um, engage with those songs, and they don't just belong to me now. So that's different.
And we know you understand that process because you've written music yourself too.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you because I've watched you perform live many times throughout my life, whether it's at the house at Christmas or Thanksgiving or in Tallahassee at the Edison or wherever. But what do you think? And you might have different answers here. Studio time versus performing live. What do you see the differences, and do you have a preference between the two?
I prefer to play live because, like Hannah said, what you're left with at the end is a feeling of the memory and not necessarily the exact factual, like second by second version of it. And so when we were in the studio, it was difficult sometimes to really with your critical ears that, you know, you spent 10 years in college refining, you get in there and you hear one little thing that you don't necessarily like, and that can just be very frustrating because you want it to be absolutely perfect. But it's such a different mindset from playing live, which is just you let it go and you can't chase after it. And so, I mean, and lots of what I do outside of the Denneckes is all live stuff. That doesn't mean that I don't enjoy recording because it's a challenge. And I feel like when we do record or when I've recorded in the past, it's like, okay, game time. Like I really got to focus, like don't mess up. But when we play live, it's a lot more fun for me. And I don't know, you feel the same.
Yeah, I definitely prefer to perform live. That's really what has always kind of been my goal, is to grow as a musician and be better and better in front of audiences. And I like connecting with people while I'm performing. So I like to see how the audience is reacting. And sometimes I can tell people are really enjoying something, or maybe they're really moved or something like that. And that actually energizes me and usually improves my performance on the spot, like with that give and take. And in the studio, you don't have people to communicate with except each other. And so that makes a big difference. But I do want to say that, like, it does feel really good to have it recorded. It's very satisfying to have like it out there. But I consider myself a musician who's completely trained to do well live in front of people. So that just is my comfort area for sure.
Well, and even on this tour, it's so funny when we play all of our songs, depending on who's in the room, you get a different volume of clapping from one song to another, depending on how people as a group liked it. Whereas, you know, a lot of times if you're listening to recordings, it's just you and your headphones and you're just like, oh, cool. But when you're in a room full of people, even if say like, oh, you didn't really get that song or whatever, but you like the trumpet solo, then, you know,
Or
there's
the
like,
person next to you laughed, or the person next to you was like,
right.
"Oh my gosh, did you hear those words?" Or,
Yep.
it
It's a
changes your
collaborative
experience.
experience.
Yeah.
And, you know, I also feel the same way when we're at like a movie theater and you're watching a movie and if there's a lot of people in there and you hear audible laughter or you hear like a gasp or whatever, as a community, you all feel like something's happening here. Whereas obviously we like to also watch TV and movies at home, but it's like that group experience of what you're watching is like something special, I
Mhm.
think.
Yeah, I liked everything you said there, and just hearing you guys live, I knew that was what your answer was going to be. And
Loaded question.
getting those reactions from people in the stands or next to you or wherever you're at has to be super invaluable. And those are the memories that you'll probably remember the most. And I like that a lot. So you talked about the tour, and can you tell the audience a little bit about where you've gone on your tour?
Okay, so we started our tour in Nashville on Thursday. So we just started. And that was really cool to start out somewhere that so many great musicians have performed. But it's also tough because everywhere in Nashville has live music like every night. So there's just wonderful musicians playing everywhere in Nashville. So you don't get a big audience unless you're famous. That being said, we actually had friends travel from Mississippi and Alabama to come hear us that night, and that made it super special. So even though it was like a pretty small crowd in Nashville, it was really special to have close friends there. And so that was a good and exciting way to start. And then we played in Athens, Georgia. And then tomorrow we're going to be playing here in St. Pete.
Whoop, whoop.
Woo! And then after this, we're calling this the southern portion of our tour. We take a little break because Eli has some professional trumpet engagements. Then we'll have some gigs throughout the Midwest and then upstate New York, and we're even going to Canada. So it should be a really fun summer.
That's awesome. When you told me you were dropping the album and I listened to it and I thought this tour, like two people getting in their car, driving around the country, like what we've done for years, you get to live out, and that is so cool. And what's been an interesting story on the tour so far? Anything?
Where to begin?
Mhm.
Well, one thing that's been surprising to me, I was telling you earlier, is that when we would say travel from Florida to Illinois, it's like a 16, 17-hour drive. And if you do it all in one day, it's over. You get home, you go to sleep, and you wake up the next day and you're just like, okay, cool, awesome. Or you break it up into 2 days and it's not so bad. But for the last 4 days, we've been driving like 4 to 7 hours each day. And that's a little like, it gets a little mind numbing, which wasn't unexpected, but it's just something to contend with when you can walk down the street and, you know, bring your instruments and play a gig, and then you go home to your own bed. That's one thing. And then driving from city to city and playing shows for people you don't know, and you don't know what to expect too, because like sometimes people are not listening at all. Sometimes people are listening very closely, and you just have to kind of react to it.
Yeah, definitely. I think like something that was really cool and was different because you've seen us play at a lot of restaurants and bars and things like that. So like we did play at a venue in Athens, Georgia called Bolo Bolo, and it was a very like kind, welcoming venue, and like everyone there is like a music lover who's like there to listen to the music. So it was kind of like a pleasant surprise that like I don't know, there was like maybe about 15 people, maybe more, 15, 20 people there watching, but they were like really listening. So that was like intimidating in some ways because it's like I did mess up, like things that aren't messed up in the recording. There are moments where like the chords came out from underneath my fingers and I, um, missed a beat or whatever. And but people are so okay with that when it's live music. It's a different expectation, but it still feels more intense when people are actually listening. But it's also obviously super special to actually share that with people and not just feel like your background music. So that was a cool experience that we really enjoyed. Really good listeners.
And yeah, don't get us wrong, we love being background music. That's fun too, but it's a different mindset depending on what's happening with the audience. So, wait, I have one funny thing to say, which is that when we were in Nashville, I didn't realize there was going to be a smoke machine. Um, and at one point it had like filled my vision and I was like, I cannot see anything. So at some point I was like trying to like I couldn't, there was lights and smoke machine. Anyway, I couldn't see anyone. And then I realized I probably looked like an idiot, trying to like swat the smoke away. Um, but
It
yeah,
was cool though. I liked the smoke machine.
yeah, it was cool.
It was vibey.
I don't know if it was like timed with the music or if
Yeah,
it
it
was
was. Yeah, they were picking
okay.
moments to do it that they thought it would work. I thought it was cool.
Eli, I could just see you.
He was just on stage trying to smack the smoke
I was like, I
away.
can't see anyone.
So going a little into the album, a question that I had that I think most casual music fans might ask would be your song Rose of Sharon was the one song that you leaked before the album actually dropped. And I've always been curious as to artists' reasoning behind leaking a particular song for their audience to take a look at and indulge in before the actual album comes out. So what was that conversation like with you two, and why did you choose that one?
Okay, so we put out 3 singles, Rose of Sharon, followed by Wintergreen, followed by Queen Anne's Lace. And the idea of obviously releasing singles at all is to just help build momentum and get people excited. I think Rose of Sharon, I like all of the songs for different reasons, but at multiple times in the process of this album coming together, that has been my favorite song. I like the chords, like it kind of goes in some different directions harmonically. I like the lyrics. There's a lot of symbolism and stuff in there. And it's a fun kind of part of my voice to sing in. So I kind of just like it. And I think it felt like it was a special part of the album. It's the first track on the album.
I think one other thing we had talked about too was like some of the songs are pretty slow. One or two of them are more upbeat, and Rose of Sharon was sort of in the middle. And so, as a first song to release, which ended up being the first song on the album as well, we wanted something that would represent as best like kind of all of what we were doing. Because if you release something that's like really fast and peppy, then people are going to assume like, oh, maybe the rest of it's going to be like that. Or if you release something really slow, they're going to be like, oh,
Laid back.
laid back. Oh, this is just kind of
Which
yeah,
it kind of is. I mean, like the
yeah.
whole album is like a pretty chill vibe, but Rose of Sharon feels like it's somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
I think that's a good point about not getting the upbeat one, because then your audience thinks that's what to expect. And I know artists that I'm mostly into hip hop, and when a single leaks and it's upbeat and I listen to it 100 times, first of all, I'm sick of listening to it by the time the album comes out, so I kind of skip over it. But I like that point you made about somewhere in between.
Yeah, you want if you're gonna release a whole album, you want something that's or we wanted something that was gonna be representative in some way of the whole like yeah. You know how like a beehive, like they have like honeycombs or like little hexagons. If you take one little hexagon, that's like a small part of the whole. And so that's, sort of the version. Anyway, that wasn't a very good metaphor, but you know what I mean.
And you mentioned the song Wintergreen, which that and Lavender are my two favorites. I've listened to your album a few times through, and to me, they're relatable. And as a hip hop head that I am, when I jump into other genres, I tend to gravitate towards the lyrics that resonate with me. And in both of those songs, whether it's talking about the snow or the small town or the friends and things that I could really relate to, what do you think about those two songs, and just from like a perspective of someone who those two songs really jumped out to me, and when what you're singing, Hannah?
Okay. Wintergreen is really that song. That song in particular, I guess, there's kind of like a childlike quality to a lot of these lyrics, because I was sort of being in the context of COVID, I was reflecting on memories and ideas that were from earlier parts of my life. And when I think about Wintergreen, that song is really related to like a child looking at plants and kind of trying to learn about like what they might symbolize in larger parts of life. And so when I was a kid, I went to a cranberry bog in upstate New York where I grew up with my dad. And I think we were on our way back from picking cranberries, and he pointed out a wintergreen plant to me, which is a little tiny green plant with red berries. You can see it on the album cover, that grows in winter, but it looks like a fresh plant. And have you guys had wintergreen gum? It
Oh,
tastes like wintergreen. Wintergreen gum is named after that plant, and so if you eat a berry off that plant, it tastes like wintergreen gum. But anyway, I was thinking about how strange it is to see something green with berries growing in the winter when so much looks dead. And so the song is like, for me, it's a lot about just looking at the things in your life and trying to understand what is permanent and what is impermanent or transient, what might go away and what might stay. And obviously for kids, that's really confusing. Like they're trying to figure out, what does it mean when someone dies in your life? Or what does it mean when someone even moves away? And so kind of I use the plant metaphor to kind of think about things kind of being alive or dead and different seasons of life and stuff like that. And yeah, so that's kind of what I'm reflecting on in Wintergreen.
Did you get that when you listened to it? Is it?
Yeah,
But that's I only ask that because I feel like a lot of times when you're writing your lyrics, at least when because lyrics aren't the first thing that I usually listen for. It's more like the melody or the rhythm or whatever, because I play trumpet a lot. I don't really do that much singing. Um, I feel like one thing that I like about your lyrics is that they are sometimes pretty vague, so you can take what you want
yeah.
away from it rather than just being like, oh, this is that.
Well, and that's the thing is like it's not meant for anyone to like get it. There's not like something to get. Like it's not meant to be a meaning that's hidden from people. It is really meant like all of my songs are meant for people to kind of interpret them in ways that are meaningful to them. So that's kind of what I was thinking about when I was writing it, but I think ideally it can mean more than that and it can mean different things to different people. So I would say the same thing about Lavender. Um, it is based on like a memory I have, but it's only in small part about that memory with Lavender, and it's more about how I experimented with thinking about that memory and bringing together like the qualities of this plant that I was thinking about. And it definitely like as the song expands, it becomes about much more than my own personal memory. So I'm hoping like when people listen to the songs, if they're lyrics focused people, which I am, I listen to the lyrics when I listen to music. I'm just hoping that it can mean something to them and it doesn't actually have to relate to what it meant to me when I wrote it. Because again, like I said, by the time it reaches your ears, it's not really for me anymore. It's for the listener. So I'm glad you found things that you relate to in it. And yeah, you're not meant to know that it's about me walking through the snow in upstate New York. But that is, I use my own experiences.
And you might get a flash of that based on a certain snippet of a lyric, but you're not necessarily going, this happened as I walked by this bush, this happened when I walked by. It's not a play by play, it's more just like a
Yeah,
flash
I'm
of a
looking for
memory.
images and symbols and things that could be meaningful beyond my own story.
And I think that's the beauty of music. It's up to the eye of the beholder to interpret how they want to interpret it. And now when I listen to it, I'll remember what you just said.
Mhm.
That image will come to my head. So I want to shift gears a little bit and just talk about music in general. And if you could both share with me, what's one thing that clicks with you? And what are some joys you get from music? Like, I know you've been doing it forever and people know that you do it. And when people tell me, what's Eli up to? How's his trumpet? What's his music like? And I like, music is connected to both of you in a special way. So what about music really clicks with you and what joys do you get from it?
I think for me, it's basically an endless project that I'll never get tired of because I'm always trying to be more consistent about what I can do. And I'm always trying to find, it's like there's this pursuit of what I want to do or sound like in my head from what I've heard other people do, or what I imagine the ideal version of myself sounds like. And then every time I go to play or practice or whatever, it's me trying to get closer and closer to that. And it'll never, that's the joy that I get from it, is it's sort of like a perpetual motion machine. It always is like pushing me forward to improve and to explore, really. It's like, yeah, it's about exploring. And I think as a kid, like I really liked visiting a new state or a new city or meeting new people or going out and exploring the woods because it was like, oh, this is new. This is cool. And now I what I didn't do as a kid or even a teenager is like sort of look within and explore, okay, well, what is inside? And I think sometimes as I'm doing things with music, I learn new things about myself that I wouldn't otherwise probably learn.
It's great. What about you, Hannah?
I love music.
Mhm.
I don't always think about a question like that, like why do I love music or what do I love about music? But to me, it's like it's a pretty like mystical experience to sing and to write songs even. Like I do feel like I'm only partially doing it myself when I sing. Like I feel like it sometimes like I used to when I first started performing a lot like at the college level and I would have recitals and stuff. I would be working on these songs that I had to perform in my voice studio, and I would be working and working and working in the practice room to get this thing to sound right. Like Eli's saying, like there's continuous opportunity to grow and be better. Like I always have more that I want to improve and grow in as a musician. But then there are these moments, sometimes they're in the practice room alone or like in my office when I'm writing a song. Other times they're in front of people where like I lose the striving and I just am like in it and it's flow, you know? And so there are times when I'm singing for people and like I kind of like even like completely lose the mental chatter, lose my sense of self in kind of a positive way where like I'm just completely in the experience of singing. Um, and I even sometimes feel like I don't remember what happened. Like
Blacked out.
yeah, like we used to say I would black out sometimes during live performances.
Which is so interesting because I've never had that experience, and it's so fascinating that like that's I think if you black out doing something you love, it's like, oh wow, well that's pretty
It's like
cool.
and it's not like I'm literally like in the moment blacked out like at all. It's like I'm actually so in the moment that it's impossible to remember how it felt because I'm not in that moment anymore. So like I'll have a moment sometimes when I'm performing live, sometimes when I'm alone, that is so like I feel so grounded and centered in that moment that 10 minutes later, I couldn't even describe to you what it feels like because the moment has passed. But it's special because then sometimes I talk to people after and they connected with the music in a really special way that surprises me. Like, oh, in that one song, you did this thing with your voice. And I don't remember that, but it became like a meaningful shared experience that all we have left of it is like a memory and like a hope that maybe it can happen again. And it always does. Like there are these spiritual experiences with music that I'm always surprised when things hit me in a certain way and I don't always know what to expect from a performance, which goes back to what I said of like I love performing live. It's just it's always new every time.
Yeah, and Eli, we talked about this a little bit before, but I know from my limited experience writing a little bit of music, to me it's just therapy. You are, I've never been more locked in the zone, just focused and like nothing else in the world matters.
It
Completely.
wakes up like your whole brain, not just, the thinking part, but the feeling part too.
And that's kind of like why I said, it is different for these songs to be like out in the world because they were like just mine. But I think it's important. Like I think it's important to share things. I think it's also important, to write things that you don't share that are just for you. But it is really interesting for it to go from being that like kind of personal moment and then it's also good to think, okay, what are these words going to mean to other people besides what they mean to me? And, that sometimes involves editing and changing a song so that it's what you want others to hear too. So that kind of back and forth between personal experience and shared communal experience is something I love about music in general.
Yeah, and for some of the people listening right now and thinking, where can I find this music? What can I do? Can you share a little bit about where do they find the Denneckes and how can they consume this product?
Well, all of our music is on Spotify, it's on YouTube. If you
Amazon, iTunes.
yeah, it's
You
streaming
You
everywhere.
can buy it. You can pay money for it if that's something you feel comfortable with on our website,
Yeah,
the
on our
Denecke, thedenekes.com.
yeah, and if you go on there, you can get like an instant digital download, or you can pre-order a CD or even a vinyl. So if you're feeling like you want to get your record player going, then
Give the
yeah,
people what they want.
that's right.
What about the merch?
You want
Funny you should ask. So, we
We have tote bags. We have two different kinds. We have a beautiful white tote bag with the album art on it and a kind of a fun, sturdy red handle.
and the album art is really special because it obviously looks beautiful, but it also each of the flowers, or I should say plants, on the album art, like the kind of circle of plants that you can see once you hold it up for
Yeah,
them.
it's a wreath. Well, they can't see it if they're only listening, but if you look up our album, you can see the wreath of flowers. And it's super special to us because our good friend, Anna Nunez, who's actually like a fine art person, so she makes like these beautiful abstract paintings. She was so kind as to make this for us. So that makes it really special to us. She's a
Mhm.
wonderful artist.
So each of the plants on there is one of the plants from the album.
Yep.
Which is
So
7. Yeah.
you can also get what is called an eco tote bag. Not sure why eco, probably because it's cotton. So it's like I don't know. I don't know why.
100% all natural.
Yeah, it's an all natural plant fiber, which we love plants here. So two kinds of tote bags, two kinds of t-shirts. There's a really cool embroidered t-shirt it literally looks like if you took out a cross stitch and embroidered the flowers. So it's kind of a fun take on the album art. But then there's also a classic screen print t-shirt that has
It's very
everything.
soft, very comfortable.
All of it's available on our website. And then there's also like postcards, stickers, and other fun paper product type things. So lots of and the art is just so pretty that
Mhm.
it makes it like something that even if you don't care for our music, you might actually like wearing these fashionable t-shirts.
Lady of the Gardens by the Denneckes, out now. Go consume it. So I like to end my podcast on something that I like to call one thing on your mind. And this could be anything related, but I like to ask my guests, what's a podcast, a TV series, a movie, something that you're into right now that's caught your attention, and just let people know, like, what are the Denneckes doing outside of the music world?
That's a good question. It's hard to think of just one thing, but we do want to catch up on Ted Lasso. We haven't started the last season yet,
Mhm.
but pretty soon we will.
Yeah, we've been watching the last season of Mrs. Maisel, The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, which is really funny, really silly. By the Gilmore Girls person. The person who made Gilmore Girls made that. So it's like the same fun, crazy dialogue.
You know what else is on my mind?
So
Dinner.
Summer.
Summer dinner.
Summer vacation.
let's go get some dinner. I want to say thank you for the first ever in-person podcast. This was a blast. I appreciate you guys driving all the way down here.
Cheers.
And cheers. Thank you for being here.
Cheers. Thanks, Cal.